So thank you, everybody. Welcome. I'm Jess Rodgers. I am the Enterprise Risk Leader at EY. Certainly extremely excited to be here. We have a lot to cover and talk about in 25 minutes. We're going to be talking about the adoption of GenAI at large corporations. And we're witnessing a surge of GenAI adoption at corporations. And quite frankly, we're seeing, when we talk about this surge, we're seeing different spectrums. Some are moving fast, some are moving slower, some are inconsistent. So we're going to be talking a bit about this and what we're seeing and talking about the governance and how folks are managing this. There is quite a bit to unpack here. So really excited for this conversation. But with that, I'd like to introduce panelists. We do have a great panel here with us today. So I'm just going to go down the line, and I will turn it over to you, Alex, to introduce yourself.
Sounds good. So Alex Barretto. I have the privilege of working at Dell Technologies, Senior Vice President for Services and Software Engineering, and happy to be here today. It's actually great to be back on campus, way back in a old age I used to be here. So good to be back on campus.
Terrific, and I'm Ted Shelton. I'm a partner with Bain in our San Francisco office. I'm a part of our enterprise technology advisory practice and focused on automation, artificial intelligence, and software development, and advising companies across every industry.
And I'm Leah. I'm the Chief Revenue Officer at Coursera, which is a very large online learning platform. And I lead the general managers of each of our businesses across enterprise, consumer, and online degrees.
Awesome, thank you. So with that, let's get the conversation started. Ted, I'm going to start with you. When it comes to GenAI adoption at these large organizations, what are your thoughts? Should organizations be moving faster or slower, and what do you think about this?
Well, I would say that no matter how fast any one of those enterprises is moving today, they are not moving fast enough. And I think that's true for a couple of reasons. First of all, the technology is moving really fast. So if you are not out there trying to learn this technology and being on top of how it is changing, you are already falling behind. So you have to be fast about the understanding, right? So it's time to learning as opposed to time to benefit. And so that's the first part. The second part is, this is a moment when everything is going to change. And there are a couple of moments that we've seen like this in the past. Electrification, the internet, but the ability to have machine intelligence which can perform human-level tasks for pennies on the dollar and exponentially faster than humans can perform those tasks is a fundamental change to competitive situations for every business and every industry. And so the challenge for executive teams is to understand, where does this disrupt our business model? Where does it fundamentally change what we should do as a company, what our competitors are going to do, who are our competitors? And so if you aren't moving fast to figure those things out, you are going to become irrelevant.
No, absolutely. I would have to agree on that. And Leah, what does going fast actually look like, though?
Yeah. So because we're in learning, companies come to us when they're like, okay, now we're going to take GenAI seriously. And I would say we see people at different phases. So there's companies that have just started communicating. This is important. You should discuss it. There's companies that take the next step and start experimenting. So maybe they create a playground, they share some prompts across the organization. Then there's the companies that dive in. And in our world, dive in means two things. It means really looking at the products that you're producing and how they could evolve with GenAI and how you could really drive more customer value, and then how you drive internal efficiency. Then there's the people who come to us, they haven't been diving in, but they want to catch up, right? So they roll out the serious learning programs and they spend a lot of money, but it's a little late. And so what I predict is, folks from EY and BCG, I think you're going to have, you're going to have tremendous opportunities, because these people who are falling behind, what they're starting to do is actually go to external consultants and outsource some of the functions. And the people who are really, really behind, we see them completely replacing entire departments and hiring afresh with AI-enabled people. So that's kind of the spectrum, and the question is, how do we actually accelerate learning so that those who are already way behind get to leap ahead and don't get left behind?
it is astounding the spectrum that we see at EY, and I'm sure, Ted, you can comment. I have clients that are really excited. They have set up, and I know we're going to talk about managing through it, where they have set up tech committees full on with ethicists. They're really forward thinking. They're looking across the organization. How can they truly get the most out of this technology, stay on the forefront? They're analyzing all of the risks, because they also believe that, it's the expectation of the talent on the ground. The teams want to be using this technology, and in order to retain top talent, they have to be using the top technologies, or else they're at risk of losing the top talent. But then you also have the clients that are calling that are just they're scared, they're shutting down, they're not using it. And that's also a massive risk, not only from a competitive landscape, but then you're going to have the employees that are just going to use workarounds or leave. And those workarounds introduce significant risk into the organization. Mm-hmm. So Alex, I'm going to ask you, so how are the large organizations like Dell managing through it? And then what do you feel is the optimal approach to govern and mitigate?
Ooh, double question.
Double question.
All right.
You can do it.
All right, we'll do it. So how are we managing through that? And what do we actually see customers actually doing too? I break it down into sort of three big buckets, and I agree with Ted. Everybody's in the pursuit of velocity, right? They want to do this fast. So the pursuit of velocity is uniform across the board. No matter who you talk to, what industry, that's a commonality. But how that actually gets implemented, where you actually do see some differentiation, three big buckets. The first one is actually this notion of functional focus. That's the terminology that I talk to our customers about. They're very deliberate. They have clarity in where they're actually going to deploy AI. There's a lot of use cases for AI, but for a particular business, there may be a specific business use case, a specific function that actually unlocks value, and they can do that at speed. So large enterprises, for example, it could be tech support, it could be sales, but they have clarity where they're going to be focused on. They're not going broad, they're picking an area, and they're going deep and experimenting very fast in that area. The second focus areas for the company is differentiation. So we talked about, and I saw some of the sessions talk about AI. AI is very valuable. AI is a gold mine. AI is going to unlock tremendous value, but how do you actually get differentiation from AI? Because otherwise, everybody's going to be on the same page. The way to unlock that is via your data. And we actually like to talk about data has gravity. So you bring AI to the data and therefore unlock the value of said data. So whether the data is on-prem and increasingly at the edge, you want to unlock that value. And you couple that with process reengineering, that's where we see customers actually truly unlock the value of AI. So you have AI close to the data, process engineering, and you unlock the value. And then the third piece you talked about is this notion of risk mitigation. I like to call it agile risk mitigation. You don't want to have this bureaucratic procedural, you got to go through 50 steps before you can actually deploy something. Rather, you want to have this agile risk management that is constantly evolving, preferably at the speed of evolution of AI itself. That way you can unlock the notion of velocity.
That's great. So then, what are some of the top use cases that you are seeing across the organizations? And Ted, you work across all industries and have a ton of experience here. So what are some of the top use cases that you see, and what is working and what's not working?
Sure. Well, the top use cases may not be the most valuable use cases, but let me go ahead and tell you the top use cases.
Love to hear it.
So I mean, you mentioned customer service, right? So having customer service transformation, I think, is on the top of every company's agenda, because we have treated customer service for so long as a cost center. Like every time my customer touches me, it costs me money, and I don't get revenue out of it because all I'm doing is giving them support for the thing they already paid me for. Right? So how do I drive that cost down? Whereas I think actually there's a very different way to think about customer service, which is how am I using all those touch points with customers to gather information about what my customers are doing, what they need, and also improving my relationship with them. And so actually, if I look at this technology as a way to drive the nominal cost of an interaction down to close to zero, I can actually increase the number of conversations I'm having with my customers. Right? So we start with a conversation with a customer that ultimately isn't going to work. They're like, how do I eliminate discussion with my customers? Like, change it to, how do I actually increase the customer conversations? increased loyalty, increased satisfaction, increased likelihood to recommend and repurchase, right? So it starts being a very, very different kind of scenario. I actually like to look for those opportunities at clients where there is a huge cognitive workload associated with something that generates a lot of value, which is why I am undertaking that cognitive workload. But because that cognitive workload is so high, I do that thing infrequently, right? So, we have a client that does personalization of marketing materials in a pharmaceutical context. The FDA is very specific about how they want salespeople to talk to doctors, because some things have gone wrong in the past. And so it is an enormously complex process to construct the right information for my salesperson to talk to a doctor about a particular pharmaceutical. Well, if I can use this technology to take that cognitive workload that's around how do I construct that messaging and reduce it, can I actually construct more messages more quickly, more personalized to specific doctors or specific classes of doctors, or even different categories, right? So I have an oncologist who I want to talk to differently than I want to talk to a general practitioner, right? So can I actually change the way I do communication and create more value as a company, right? Those opportunities to really transform the business are the ones that are working. The ones that I think are not working are where we're just taking cost out. I'm not saying cost taking out is bad, but I don't think it moves the needle. It does not inform the organization about the strategic value of this technology.
Agreed.
So that's what's not working.
Agreed. No, I would have to agree, and you should have a really well thought out strategy, and it should align for AI, and it should align to the overall organization strategy, and it shouldn't just be, I agree with you on the cost takeout. Leah, would love to hear from you on use cases and just overall your perspective from where you sit and your organization, which is unique.
Yeah. So I think, we started out and we actually applied the sort of response framework that we use after COVID to tackle AI. And there were the internal efficiency use cases and there were product use cases. And very quickly, the bulk of the organization's focus came to the product. We actually held a massive hackathon where everyone was invited to use. We made all the tools available. Everyone's invited to come up with product innovations. And where we narrowed that down to is thinking about, so I'm in education, and there's 3 key big challenges that have held the education sector back. One is the cost of content, cost an enormous amount in the past to make content. 2 is accessibility, to actually translate content and get it out there. And 3 is persistence, getting people to actually want to learn and continue learning. And from those 3 problems, we ended up releasing 3 major products that have just been accelerating the business. So one is an online tutor or coach. I think that's probably been one of the most popularized use cases, but it makes an enormous difference we see in our learner activity. 2, we were able to take millions of dollars out of the business and release all of Coursera's catalog in 21 languages and see significantly more enrollments and completion rates. And then 3, we launched an AI tool which allows anyone to create a course and add expert content in hours versus months. And so I think the challenge is you can get outside consultants and you can do analysis by function, but to really innovate in the core of your product in the way that I think you're talking about and figure out what brings customer value, that's where I think a lot of the magic of AI is. And that's what it's challenging to figure out.
Very much so.
Yeah.
So when I think about, we also see a lot of challenges out there and realizing the value. And I see some of the missteps come from the lack of a strategy and going in. Alex, I would love to hear from you on maybe some of your personal experiences and maybe where some things have gone wrong and some of the challenges and some of the learnings.
Yeah, I think one of the key areas, which is why I mentioned this notion of functional focus, is in the beginning there's a desire to tackle all problems because he looks like a sea of opportunities. And actually what happened is in that sea of opportunity, you get lost in just pursuits of different things that actually don't yield results. And next thing you know, you're looking at yourself and say, a month has gone by. So that clarity and that specificity on what functionality are you going after, what are the specific use cases you're going to tackle, at speed, is a lesson learned and one I think can be applied to all. and really unlocks that notion of velocity. I do also like that what you said about this customer support. I think is a fundamental opportunity to transform the business, like you said. It's not just about cost out. We're actually, and I promise this is not a shameless plug, it's just an example. we are actually taking those interactions and getting the input on how customers are actually using the products, injecting that back into product development, and it has dramatically sped the process by which we actually create products that are purpose-built for how customers are using them, right? It speeds that whole process from getting customer feedback, understanding how they do it, and injecting into the product. So that cycle has dramatically changed, and it's fundamentally a different way of operating, as you said.
Yeah, exactly. I do think that there are three things that we see the leading clients doing, and all in parallel. To your point about like, hey, there's too much going on. I think there is too much going on. You do need to be moving faster. The three things in parallel. First of all, you need to enable every worker with these tools to improve individual worker productivity. I see way too many companies going, hey, the best thing to do is lock this all down, not let anybody use it.
Mistake.
Right? Huge mistake, right?
Huge
because
mistake.
Also, not only because you're going to increase individual worker productivity, but it's also the first step in real culture change. Right? So if you start getting your own employees to wrap their heads around, how can I use these tools? How do they help me personally? How do I become faster, better, stronger?
But I also think if you lock it down, they're going to find ways to work around.
Absolutely.
And that's where you're going to have the security and the privacy concerns, because they don't all have the awareness and appreciation of what it means to put, non-public information into ChatGPT.
Absolutely. And I don't want to entirely diminish the idea of looking for productivity improvement in functions, right? So, the cost out, like it's not that cost out is a terrible idea, right? Yes, you actually should be, as business people, always looking at your business process, to your point, business process redesign, rethinking what can I eliminate, what can I streamline, what can I automate, what can I use AI to do, right? So that is a core part. But I think companies that don't do those two things and also look for that transformation opportunity. How do I transform my product, my business, do something different, also recognize where I am under threat because somebody else can do something that eradicates the value that I deliver, right? And understand how am I going to respond to that. So do those three things all at once, even though it's difficult to do so much all at once. But I think the other thing that you mentioned is like a month goes by and you're lost in the cycle.
Analysis paralysis.
Take on things that you can deliver value on in 2-week sprints. Do not take on bigger projects because, by the way, you take on a bigger project. I've had this so many times, conversations with clients that say, hey, we've been working for 3 months to solve this problem, and we woke up this morning and X vendor released something that actually solves a problem that we were thinking we were solving. Like, no, don't do that. Don't take on 3-month longs. Take on 2-week sprints.
I think those are all really, really great points. And I also think engaging the teams to help solve some of these problems. I know at EY we try and engage the staff through the senior managers for looking if we have something that is highly manual and we believe that AI can help solve it. We try to get them engaged to come up with some of the bright ideas, and we get everybody involved, and that just from a culture and community and morale perspective, that really helps uplift, and that makes a big difference. I also don't want to underestimate the board, and the governance from the top, and making sure, from a board and educational perspective, that they truly understand, they have the right education, and that they can appreciate the risks associated. They're asking the right questions. So really, certainly at the board level, I'm sure we're all engaged in the conversations at the board, but having that right structure and the governance from the top is also really, certainly important.
I mean, I've actually been really proud of the public boards that we work with. I had a conversation recently with the CIO of a large health insurance company who said, I have to come up with an answer for the board on what we're doing about AI. And he stops and he's like, I've never in my career had a phone call from a board member before this. And now I've had 3 in the last 2 weeks, right? The boards are very engaged. So it's a fantastic thing. Because far too many times from a governance perspective, we don't see the boards leaning in when they need to. On this one, they are.
They are. And they're actually, I've seen at least from some of my clients, they're raising their hands where they feel that they might need a bit more expertise to be able to ask the right questions And they're also challenging the board composition to make sure they have the right people. And they're also challenging, do they need tech committees? So they're really, truly seeing the way forward and making sure. So, but I did want to make sure we highlighted the board, because I do think that that's really important, and we'd be remiss. Are there any other last comments as we're coming down to time?
The only thing I would add is I think we're talking a lot about like leadership from the top, with the exception of kind of releasing the tools. And the data so far shows that less than 50% of people below the director level in organizations actually are using the tools and or have sort of basic AI education. And so that's another kind of missing piece. It's obviously something Coursera is trying to solve, but you need to find a way in your organization for people at the front lines to actually understand the power of the tools, the potential of the tools for their job, for their own development, to, I think, unleash the power as well. And a top-down strategy is important, but it can't all be top-down given how fast the tech and the competition is moving.
Yeah, I guess I'll sit here and make shameless plugs for both you and you. No, absolutely. All of our research shows employees are really hungry for education.
Yes.
And I mentioned sort of as a brief point that giving these tools to each individual to enable individual worker productivity is the beginning of culture change, right? And that's what we need. Like all the other things we want to go and do and change in the organization by using these tools, you're going to need our employees to embrace them. They're only going to embrace them when they get the education, they understand why this is valuable and how to use it successfully, and then they'll be like, oh yeah, I want more of this. And one of the ways they can get more of it, and I think this is the other amazing thing, is this technology is more and more accessible. We don't just have OpenAI and Google out there where we have to rely upon these large public models. You can buy from Dell an AMD-powered machine and run your own LLMs, use Lamini, who's another partner of yours, to go and fine-tune it for yourself. Right? So you can do these amazing transformative things inside your own data center. And so it's not like you're going to do the same thing that everybody else does. You have the opportunity as an enterprise to really innovate and change how you work as a business and control that future for yourself.
I'm going to have to echo that. You can buy it right now from Dell. I think I'll add this notion of, I use it internally with my team. I say, have no fear. Have no fear of the technology and embrace it at speed. Yes, we're going to get some things wrong. Yes, we have to think about risk. But the reality is, our competitors are going to be doing it. Your competitors are going to be doing it. Whether it's your immediate competitor or a competitor that will rise in the future, someone will be doing it and will be disrupting the business. There's too much opportunity in front of us. And so not to embrace it because we're afraid of risk or we're afraid of business impact, we're afraid of hallucination, et cetera, it would be a mistake. So have no fear, embrace it, and go forward.
Awesome. Well, thank you. Appreciate it. And thank you, everyone.